In this video guide, we'll assemble the CyberBrick Official Forklift and get it ready to do some heavy lifting. Details related to the required printed parts and CyberBrick hardware can be found on the CyberBrick Official Forklift's MakerWorld page. From there, the guide document can be downloaded and used to follow along with this video guide. Part 1. Reduction gearboxes. Start by using the clutch shaft piece to fit the smooth metal pins into the holes in the gearbox housing. Make sure the more central pin is flush with the back of the housing. Fit the clutch shaft piece inside the gear, which has a recessed area with inward-facing teeth. Then, fit the pinion gear to the motor shaft. Next, prepare the tube of grease to be used for the following steps. Place the compound gear with the smallest central gear onto the pin shown on the left. The motor and its pinion gear will then sit on top of this gear. Apply a small amount of grease to the motor's pinion gear and the small central gear. Place the largest compound gear onto the pin shown on the right. Place the remaining gear onto the left pin and apply grease to both of the smaller central gears. Place the clutch shaft piece onto the pin on the right. Finally, place the gearbox housing cover onto the gearbox housing, fitting the clutch shaft through the hole and the left pin through the smaller hole. Use two M2 machine screws to hold the housing cover in place. Repeat those steps again for the second reduction gearbox. Part 2. Body assembly. Fit both of the reduction gearboxes into the forklift lower chassis as shown. Place the upper chassis onto the lower chassis, then secure it with one M2 screw. Take one of the wheels with the center hole and place it over the protrusion in the lower chassis. Fix the wheel in place with an M2 screw, making sure it is not so tight it prevents the wheel from spinning freely. Place a wheel cover inside the recessed area in the wheel. Repeat for the other front wheel. Take one of the other wheels, which have the flattened slot, and fit it over the gearbox drive shaft on one side. Repeat for the rear wheel on the other side, and place the wheel covers into both wheels. Fit the tracks over the wheels as shown. Plug the 2-pin cable into the receiver board into the socket shown. Connect the other end of the cable into the LED hub. Plug each motor cable into the receiver board sockets on the opposite side of the forklift so the cables cross each other. Position the receiver and LED hub into their places on the upper chassis. Fix the LED hub in place with one M2 screw, and the receiver in place with two M2 screws. Place the power switch upside down into the back of the chassis as shown, and fix it in place from above with an M2 screw. Fasten 2 screws into the top of the upper chassis. Fasten 2 more onto each side of the rear of the upper chassis. These will be used later with magnets to hold the forklift's shell in place. Route an LED cable through the headlight hole on the headlight bracket, and ensure the LED sits flush in the opening before fitting the headlight cover. Do the same for the other headlight. Route the headlight cables through the channel in the headlight bracket. Route the cables through the slot in the headlight mounting bracket. Fit the 2 brackets together as shown. Then fix the brackets together from the bottom with an M2 screw. Connect the large 2-pin cable to the right side of the power switch. Route the other end through the upper chassis and connect it to the front of the receiver. Connect the right headlight cable to the rightmost slot of the LED hub. Connect the left headlight to the slot next to it. Being careful not to pinch any wires, snap the headlight assembly into place into the front of the upper chassis. Part 3. Front forks. Fit the servo mast bracket to the lower forklift mast, fitting its 4 protrusions into the corresponding holes and the servo bracket over the servo cable and onto the servo. Fit the servo into the servo mast bracket with the orientation shown and fix it in place with the 2 longer Phillips head screws provided with the servo. Next, take the upper forklift mast and slide it onto the lower mast as shown. Flip the mast assembly over and trim the 2-sided servo horn at the location of the holes closest to its center, before fitting it into the servo pinion gear. Place the pinion gear onto the servo shaft with the servo horn facing out, then fasten it with the shorter Phillips head screw provided with the servo. Place the driven gear next to the pinion gear and fasten it with an M2 screw. Fasten 2 screws on either side of the top of the forklift mast. Fasten 2 more at each side on the front, but after tightening them all the way, loosen them each by 1 full turn. Fasten the last 2 at each side of the bottom of the mast and then loosen them each by 2 full turns. Measure out 2 lengths of black nylon cord, each 1 foot or 30 centimeters. 3 full revolutions of the flat spool is about the right length. Make a knot at one end of each cord. Take the knotted side of one cord and place it through the slot on the mast as shown. Route the cord through the opening and around the M2 screw from the previous step. Next, route it all the way down to the bottom of the mast and route it underneath the head of the screw there. Route it back up to the final screw near where we started. While holding some tension around the final screw, tighten down that screw to fix the cord in place with some tension. Repeat for the other cord on the other side. Trim the ends of the cords if they are excessively long. Snap each fork into place onto the fork carriage plate. The arrows on the plate point towards the bottom of the forks and in the same direction that they are snapped. Snap the fork carriage over the mast as shown. Slide the fork carriage all the way down and route 1 nylon cord into the curved channel in the fork carriage plate. Carefully place a bead of glue, only over the curved channel and cord. Repeat for the other side, once again, being careful to keep the glue from spreading away from only where it is needed. Part 4. Shell Assembly. Route the servo cable underneath the headlight assembly and fix the mast to the chassis with 2 M2 screws. Place the fork bottom stop into its place underneath the chassis and fix it with a screw. Connect the servo to the receiver board on the pins shown, with the yellow wire facing the right side of the forklift. Assemble the protective cage as shown. Fit the 2 cage pieces into the back piece and use glue on the top plate. Wipe away excess glue. Place the cage onto the forklift chassis by fitting it over the headlight bracket and into the rear chassis slots. Place a bead of glue in each magnet slot in the seat. Place a magnet in each slot and wipe away excess glue. Assemble the rear cover by gluing the rear grille into place and then the top plate and wiping away excess glue. Then, glue in the 2 magnets. Route the battery cable through the chassis and plug it into the power switch. Place the rear cover onto the chassis. Finally, place the seat onto the chassis. And just like that, your CyberBrick forklift is ready to take your creations to the next level.